Mechanics, I'm going to show you how to change a radiator on a 2005 Subaru Legacy GT. Mine started leaking a little bit. Here we go. You can see the coolant down there. So I think this radiator has kind of had it. So we'll be replacing the radiator. I replaced that hose clamp up on the top just to make sure it wasn't the upper radiator hose that was leaking. I did notice the coolant going down a little bit, so now I'm smelling it. So time to replace it. All right, let's dig into this. Is we are going to drain the radiator, and you can take off a lower radiator hose or remove the drain plug on the radiator, which is on the right hand side of the radiator. I want to get underneath the radiator anyway, so I'm going to have to take off the shrouding down, plastic shrouding here down on the bottom. I'm going to jack up the car, get at this a little bit easier too. Car up on jack stands. It's always a good idea to have the car properly secured so you're not working underneath the jack. Wouldn't want that car to come down on you. Okay, so we got a few fasteners to take off. One there, one down there, there. So just work your way around. Take this pan off. All right, up there. Well, I'll show you how you're going to take that out. Sometimes these clips can be kind of frustrating. So I'm going to focus in here. See how that's? Come on, focus in there. And so you have to do is you have to pull the center part out. Get a screwdriver, a flathead screwdriver underneath there. Pull that up, and that will release the clip. Okay. Towards the front, the one on the left is a full bolt. The one on the right is broken off. Two of them were broken off. Apparently the last person who took this off had that problem, so I will be drilling out and retapping that and putting some new bolts in. Looks like one that's out, or shroud, whatever you want to call it. As you can see, we got a little bit of coolant in here. Alright, let's take a look at the radiator. Yeah, look at that. A little bit of ethylene glycol all over the place here. No surprise. Hey, the other thing I want to show you now is the drain plug. You can see it right there. And there it is. So we're going to take a Phillips screwdriver and loosen that up, put a pan underneath here, and drain that coolant out of there. Okay, since you're underneath here, good thing to check is to look at your CV joints. Make sure you don't have anything leaking. That can slow you down. All right, let's pull that plug out. Hopefully that just dripped down there again here. So we're gonna have to take out a few things up here. We're gonna take off this air shroud. Little fastener there, and then we'll take these bolts out for the radiator. 3 bolts, one there, one in the center, one off to the electrical connector down there. We're going to disconnect that. We're going to disconnect all these little hoses. And the upper radiator hose, and then the lower radiator hose down below. As you can see, we're still draining coolant. You don't have to take off this clamp here or that clamp there, because you can see, well, you can take that clamp off, but this one right here, you don't have to take that one off because that's going to a pipe. It's going over here. It's going over to the radiator into the coolant reservoir, and actually this piece you want to take off, this bolt as well as that bolt, so that pipe comes off. Because basically what we're going to have to do here is we'll pull the radiator out. We're going to have to transfer all this stuff, the fan assembly and the coolant assembly and all this piping, everything over onto the new radiator, because we didn't get new stuff of that. Alright, now we're going to disconnect the transmission lines there and the clamps. Twist the hose a little bit so that it breaks it loose. Pull them off. Lines will drip a little bit, so put something underneath that to collect it. Don't let it drip in your face. To get this one hose, transmission cooler fluid hose off. So I am going to remove this lower radiator hose, give myself a little bit more room, prepare for some antifreeze to come out of that. It looks like to get these hoses off, the transmission cooling line hoses, we are going to have to take off this little metal silver colored shrouding here, about 4 bolts. We'll take that off, and that will make getting the hoses off easier. What to do is take off the coolant reservoir. And the way to do that is you pull over on this guy right here, and it snaps out. There's another connector plug for the cooling fan down there you got to get, and then this whole unit here will come out. Cooling fans out. Don't want to keep them in the order that they were in, although it may be obvious which way they go in. Now the radiator seems to be completely free, and it should just pull out. We've got kind of a mess down there, don't we? Check your new radiator versus your old radiator. Oh, that old one looks kind of nasty, doesn't it? And but you know, you want to look and make sure that all the connection points for all the bolt holes look like they're the same. Make sure that you've got the same inputs, outputs. They look like they're in the same place. Because if you don't, that could be a problem. You might as well identify that right away. It appears that these are the same. The only thing different, it looks like these foam pads are not on the new radiator, and we can probably move those over. All right, let's get started. Sure your old and your new hoses are the same before you dive into that. To also replace my thermostat. It's working fine, but it's a lot easier to get at now with the radiator out, so I thought I would do that. Not so much for me, but for the next person who owns this car. Thermostat from underneath, and just looks like 2 10mm bolts. Take that out, and it should be a piece of cake. Out of the thermostat housing off. Thermostat from down below. This guy's being a little bit uncooperative and coming out, so I'm going to have to tap it with a plastic can. Opportunity to compare old thermostat and new thermostat. And don't forget to put that new washer on. The old thermostat has a little valve up on the top here, and I think that's for releasing air. Out of abundance of caution, I drilled a small hole in the top of the thermostat. I think this helps bleed the air out of the system. As you can see, the OE thermostat has a hole in the top, it's probably a little primitive check valve. So that isn't a lot of water. Not a lot of water is going to pass through that. So, but air will. So make sure you get that surface in there cleaned off really well. Don't scratch it, creating any channels, but you want to make sure that's really good and clear. Hey, the other thing you could do, since you've got all this stuff out, it's so easy to get at the belts, is to look at your rib belts and see if they're looking good, because this would certainly be the time to change those if you need to do that. Set up there, and make sure that you put the air bleed hole on the top. Clean up the thermostat housing. The sealing surface is really good, as well as around the where the hose is going to go. You don't want to have any leaks after you get through all of this. Go down on, tighten each bolt a little bit at a time, so you draw the thermostat housing down evenly on the washer, on the gasket. Okay, this would be a good time to clean the electrical connectors. As you can see, they get a little bit of oil and antifreeze and crap on them. We got ones on the left and one on the right for the left and the right fan. You can do that with any electronic cleaner that won't damage the plugs, the rubber, or the insulation. See that little tab there? There's one over on the other side. Those are going to go into those rubber grommets down there, and away we go. Got the radiator in. Let's look at the lower radiator holes in. And next we will be mounting the transmission cooler lines on. Notice I use aftermarket hose clamps instead of the original ones. I think they provide a little bit more bite, more pressure, prevent leaks. Transmission lines hooked up to the radiator, and I'm not going to tighten those down yet until I'm sure that I don't have to move them. Let's put in the fans next. Left fan housing in there, and you can see over here there's a hole there. There's a hole there. There are little studs on the bottom of this assembly for those to slide into. So now I'm just going to put in one bolt up here just to hold this so it doesn't flop around, and I can make sure that we're ready to proceed putting stuff together down below. And see, I got the right side fan in. Also notice that I took off the upper radiator hose. Made it a little bit easier to slide in there. So don't put that on until after you've got the fan in. Okay, so now we will hook up the fan, electrical, and go down underneath and put that pan assembly in. We're getting right, we're moving right along here. We got the upper radiator hose connected again. Let's put these brackets on. One over there, one over here, right here like this. Put these babies on, and that will secure the radiator in place. And then we're going to go underneath and put this pan back on. This pan or this shroud. Those bolts are just going into plastic. Those 4 bolts. So don't over torque those babies. You'll break the plastic and have some more work. Well, I called it a pan before. Really a heat shroud. You got your turbocharger exhaust pipe going across here. Apparently they don't want that radiator to get too hot, especially since it's plastic. Also, don't forget to have tightened up your transmission oil cooler lines before you put this pan on, or the heat shroud. Checking the radiator to make sure that it's exactly the same. Well, look at that fitting right there, and look at this fitting right over here. Obviously quite a bit bigger. I'm getting much better at taking out that radiator. We're going back to the store tomorrow and see if we can find the correct one. This goes to the turbocharger, so one would think that it needs to be that size. We got the right radiator now. That size opening, that's good. Another 40 bucks. But here we go. We got the brackets that hold the radiator on, and the bolts up on top here, down this little bracket here, which is for the hood, and we have the fans plugged in again, transmission lines hooked up again. We're just going to double check all of our clamps on our hoses, make sure everything is right, and then we will install the smaller hoses here. All right, this was our problem hose. This one is a 1/2 inch diameter, and the other one was way too small. All right, keep going here. Now we have all the small hoses hooked up. Oh, notice that these brackets, these bolts here, actually hold on this small tube bracket, small tube holding bracket. Right, next we are going to put in the coolant reservoir. It drops right down in there. And we got the coolant reservoir in there. It kind of slides in here, and then here there's a little snap. It pushes in here and snaps. Okay, so this would be, you know, since you had that out, that would have been a great time to clean that coolant reservoir if you haven't done that for a while. I had just changed the coolant not too long ago, so I was good to go. All right, so we got everything in here. We got a funnel here. We're going to start pouring antifreeze in. Once it fills up, then we will start her up and see what happens. We're just going to double check the drain plug, make sure that that's in there firmly. And again, I've already checked all the hose connections, so we should be good to go. And see a little air bubbles coming out here. So we want this to keep bubbling here. So one thing you can do, be very careful about this doing, because you got spinning belt here. And it's a spinning belt and a spinning pulley right there. So you got to be really careful. But you can squeeze. You can help get some of the air bubbles out. Also like to get the car warmed up enough so that the thermostat opens up. We got complete circulation. That'll take a few minutes here. I suppose I should open up the door so I don't asphyxiate myself. Alright, so that antifreeze we have is from overfilling it, but I don't see any transmission cooler at least. Next thing we're going to have to do is put on this shrouding, this plastic shrouding. I got some new plastic clips for it, and we're going to have to drill out this guy right here, because it broke off inside there, one there and one on the other side. Did it for me and did it for the person who worked on this before me, so we can fix that. We're all done. Got the air intake shroud back on. New radiator cap. Fluid's full. We have the shroud back on. We had to drill out and tap a couple of holes because those bolts got rusty and snapped off. That took about as long as putting in the radiator. No, not really. Okay, that was good. We're done. Congratulations. Till next time.